Hello again. For this module, we're going to be looking at the Odyssey. So certainly the Odyssey is a poem that you are familiar with, whether you have read it or not, I'm sure. Unfortunately, we are going to only look at two small little sections of the Odyssey. That is all we have time for in this class. But I do suggest, if not in another class, at some time you find to read through the entire poem. It's one of those poems that obviously is a classic, right? And is well known in Western civilization. And it's also the kind of story that should be read at different times in one's life. So if you suffered through the Odyssey when you were in high school, just remember what kind of a person you were in high school. So then maybe you want to look at the Odyssey from a more mature perspective. In any event, I do have in this module a copy of the made-for-TV movie. So you can click on that and you can view that in our little module here. And that is the entire Odyssey. The made-for-TV movie, which was made, I think, in the late 90s. It actually covers the entire story, and it's not bad. I think that the Odyssey is ripe for a remake, but if you have time, take a look at it, and so you can get the entire story in your head. Okay, so let's take a look here first at what time period are we talking about. We're talking about the archaic period of Greece, and the Greek civilization, the ancient Greek civilization, is broken up into various different time periods. They're somewhat arbitrary. It's by scholars, so it's when you refer to the archaic period, you know that the Odyssey is in that time period. And then there are other time periods that we're going to be looking at, in particular the classical period. So again, it's not a rigid system. It's about, the archaic period is approximately 750 BCE to 480 BCE. And then, the different periods are just a helpful reference point, so you have an idea of when certain things were happening. What do we see in the archaic period of Greece? This is where we're going to get the rise of democracy, philosophy, theater, poetry. This is actually a really very significant time in the ancient world. If you think about the thousands of years ago, these were quite prescient type of ideas that were being developed. I mean, democracy, something that I think us in the United States and in Western, civilization, democracy is something that we just take for granted. We don't really think about it that much. But if you look at it from the perspective of time, it really is something that was quite unusual and was not practiced, and was not practiced throughout history up to the modern time period, as well as still not practiced in many parts of the world. So where do we get these words here? I like this when you learn things and you start getting these foundations, you can start making connections to things. So we have the polis, right? You hear of the term metropolitan, right? So the polis is the city-state, which is, this idea of having a self-contained area that's governed by itself, but then it forms a confederation with other city-states. So this political type of idea. And we can see here again more of the words. The political also derives from polis, and democracy is from the word demos, the people. So we do know, let's not get too happy, right? Who are the people? The people are the free male citizens, of course. Slaves, foreigners, and women were not considered the people. This is an interesting concept, and we can certainly even again look at this from our perspective, our democracy. United States is very young, is it not? 230 something years. And how long has it been since people have been allowed to be part of the process, the political process? Who were the people? How were they defined? Well, of course, we know first it was the white men that had money. Then it was white men that didn't have as much money. Then it was black men who used to be slaves. Then, of course, it was women. And when did that happen? 1920, right? So you can see that democracy going all the way back to this time period has had a long evolution, and it took a long time for democracy to truly mean the reflection of the people. Something to ponder. When we look here, what are some of the famous city-states? Well, probably the two most famous are going to be Sparta and Athens. And while not entirely fair, Sparta is known more for its warrior state, and Athens is known for its intellectualism. So you can see that terrible movie 300, and you can know that was right the Spartan soldiers. Okay, let's move on. Let's take a closer look now at the Odyssey, written by Homer Simpson. No, I'm kidding. Don't answer that in your quizzes. Don't do that. Okay, so now we have the Odyssey that's written in the Archaic period, is set in the Mycenaean Greece period, about the 12th century BCE, which is the Bronze Age. And so while it was written at a later date, it's set earlier. And what are some interesting things that we see in this poem that we're used to now, but was definitely brand new back then? We have a narrator that we have in the third person and omniscient. We're all familiar with the omniscient narrator. He said, she said, they did, etc. It tells us everything. But then we also have the adventures narrated by Odysseus himself. In particular, the books 9 through 12. This is very interesting because it's going to give a different perspective on the story itself. When Odysseus is telling his story, you have to think about anybody who's telling their own story. It's being filtered through that person. And whether intentionally or not, some things get changed, some things are embellished, other things are dropped out. So when you're reading these two little excerpts, take a notice of when Odysseus himself is narrating the story and when it's just the omniscient narrator. Because when Odysseus is telling his story, it gets quite fantastic, the adventures that he talks about. So you have to always kind of ponder, did they really happen or not? Another part of it is we have large portions of the poem are told in flashbacks, and that's going to be where Odysseus is narrating his own story. It's already modern day for Odysseus, and then he goes back and he's retelling his story. So it's flashbacks. We're going to be reading the part with the Cyclops. So Odysseus has already gone through all his turmoils, and now he's narrating his story in a flashback. What else do you need to know? The Odyssey begins where the Iliad ends, and you might have also seen another horrible movie, Troy. That was the Iliad, right? And the Odyssey is the adventures that Odysseus has trying to get home. And we did talk about Homer up here. He is credited with writing what was obvious when you read it, when you read the poem, even in translated English. You can see there's a lot of repetition. And it's obvious that this poem was something that was told orally, and that whatever Homer's role was in telling the story, it was definitely something that had been repeated orally before it was set down. So you can look here at the quick plot summary that I put together, because again, we're only looking at 2 different parts. You could read this at your leisure. Just be known that you should familiarize yourself with the background of the story, because then if you're reading just 2 little excerpts, it's kind of being told out of context, and it's not something that is conducive to you understanding the entirety. So you should read through the summary so you have an idea of what's going on with the plot, or even better yet, read the entire poem. I'm sure that's what you're going to jump on and do right now. And barring that, maybe you want to take some time and watch the movie so you know where everything fits in. At the very minimum, do read through the plot summary. And so that is our brief tour through the archaic period of Greece and a brief tour of the Odyssey. Thanks.